Welcome to Endorian Guitar Works. I am Matt Ackerman.
Brian McCoy. This is Endorian Guitar Works Backstage, a guided look at life experiences and the ways and means of a guitarist's journey.
That's absolutely right. And no one got to see this like 5 minutes ago. I actually screwed it up. I give Brian crap all the time for having to read the tagline, and then I went and was having a conversation with our guest, who we're going to pop over to in just a second. And I was kind of like talking about our what's our mission statement and motto, and what do we stand for? And then I went, ugh.
And it's right there in front of us the whole time. So, what you been up to, Matt?
We have had some busy weeks. It's been kind of some ups and downs this last week. So we went to a guitar show.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Right before we went to the guitar show, which we'll touch on. So I found out some news a couple weeks back that really kind of floored me. And it's only relevant because it has to do with one of our supporters on this show.
Right.
Every once in a while, we would see someone pop on this show, and his name was Chris. And Chris was the father of one of my best friends growing up.
Right.
And I did not realize that he was really, really into what we were doing. He was really, really proud of what we were trying to do here. And it shocked me when I called up my buddy to wish him a happy birthday, and he told me his dad passed away.
Oh, man.
And
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, me too. Chris was a fantastic dad and fantastic individual, and I had no idea that he had been watching this show that we do. I mean, I knew he popped on here and there, but I didn't it was affirming to me. I felt so blessed to, and it's not even really the right word, but it was another one of those moments where I'm like, when this is tough and it's tough to do a podcast and it's tough to get yourself out there, every couple and do the planning and do this and do that and do this and that. Even the people that aren't necessarily musicians are like, there's moments where it resonates,
right?
And it helps them take that next step. So I went to his memorial last Saturday, and not a dry eye in the house, and it was just it was one of those moments, really, really bittersweet, because he led a very full life. Even his son, who was reading the eulogy, was like, I can't even be, like, he's sad, he's going to miss him. But, there was nothing that was left.
It's not like he's going to be missing anything by
there
not being here
There wasn't
anymore.
anything left open.
Undone.
The man led a beautiful life, and it was confirming to me, live your life, do the music. What you need to do, you've got this shot, do it.
Yeah. Well, and I've been musing along that same note lately, playing a lot more music, 2 bands, doing this show. My life has actually been more enriched since all of that, becoming more busy in music again. So I'm a lot more happier and fulfilled, and it sounds like he had that same kind of mentality for just life in general.
So I want to take a moment and to Christopher Moore. Yeah, I got to take a sip for it to count.
Pour one out later for the homies.
March 11th, we went to the West Coast Guitar Festival.
Yes,
and we took these guys behind us.
All 5 of these beauties.
As you can see, they didn't sell, but that's okay, because the point there is to network and to give people a chance to play them.
I played all day. I've never played for that long in my life. I think that's awesome. My fingers are still a little sore. It's great.
So we're going to dive into that stuff later on, but I don't want to hesitate, because we have a really exciting show we're super excited for today's show, and you've seen us, we've been hitting up the socials saying, please, you want to see this show, you have a chance. There is someone I want to introduce. He's on the line right now.
You want to give a little backstory? You have met...
I do want to give a little backstory, but I want him to have a chance to correct me where I'm wrong when we pop him on here.
And don't forget, those of you watching, we do have the live chat going, so please join us. Ask questions, have feedback. We love to have that conversation with you as well as with our guests.
But on the line, we have the lead guitar player, formerly of Autograph, Mr. Steve Lynch, joining us. How are you doing today, Steve?
Hey guys, how you doing? I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for being here. And I know that you're East Coast, but I didn't remember if you were still Florida. You bounce between Florida and New Jersey, right? Or are you?
Yeah, I go back and forth. My girlfriend's in Jersey, and I'm down here, so we kind of just go back and forth.
Okay.
Right on.
Either way, you're still 10:30 going on 11. But as you said to me, that's just early afternoon.
It's like late afternoon, really.
Yeah. He just had
almost
lunch,
dinner time,
and it's time to go.
Yeah.
So I I guess I don't remember if I was 17 or 19. I'm having trouble remembering if I met Steve. What?
That's what happens at our age.
That's what happens. That's what happens.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a town called Renton, Washington, and when I was realizing I wanted to become a guitar player, I did the thing. I went into American music. I went into Guitar Center. I don't think it was Guitar Center at the time. It was American music.
Yeah, I don't think we had a Guitar Center back then.
And
Yeah, that's right.
the day I stepped into A Sharp Music, rest that business is sold. It was my store until 2021. I met my mentor Lyle Long, who managed that store along with Skip. And when I was about at the appropriate age where he said, you need to challenge yourself, he introduced me to Steve. And Steve was teaching out of A Sharp at that time. And I was a 17-year-old with, who probably need to be reined in a little bit. I'd already found the quick way to feel like I was a good guitar player. And it just took a couple lessons with Steve to open my eyes.
Did I yell at you?
What's that?
Did I yell at you?
I don't think you yelled at me, but I do remember.
No, I didn't.
I do remember that I got humble really fast, and So that's how I met Steve, and Steve and I did not really, I didn't really keep in touch with a lot of folks because we were kind of pre-social media.
Right.
And then
right.
we got into social media, like unless you knew somebody's phone number or corresponded with them or whatever, you didn't really stay in touch. But then the pandemic happened, and I decided that I wanted to, I could do this healthy or not healthy. So I pushed myself, and I wasn't sure how Steve was going to react when I said, I'm going to learn how to play the Turn Up Your Radio solo. And you know what he was? Nothing but supportive.
That's awesome.
Dude chimed, I posted it, and he's like, good job, man. And I was like, he is still the same down-to-earth rocker guy.
Yeah.
That, we're in the same mindset place where it's just like, you're always on Facebook. You're wishing people well. You're sending people, even all through the pandemic. I remember seeing videos where you were out taking a walk, encouraging people to just take care of themselves. And
just keep a healthy mindset. That's the thing, is just keeping yourself healthy physically and mentally, and go out in nature and just enjoy as much as you can. You don't have to be around people when that whole pandemic thing was going on.
Right.
You could just actually go out in nature and just enjoy yourself. So
absolutely.
Well, how is it, Steve, that you can stay so humble after all these years? You've traveled the world and played in front of thousands of people, and you've got the records on the wall and everything, how do you stay so humble?
Those are my neighbors. I just borrowed them.
Oh, okay. So that's how.
But I think that the way I've stayed pretty much grounded is I look at myself as being very fortunate for what has happened to me, and I look at there's so many guitar players out there that are equally as talented and more talented than I am, and so I look at it like I wish they all had a chance to be able to make it in this business, and have the good fortunes that I have, and but I just like connecting with people in a real down to earth, inner core type of way. And I like to help people along as far as learning and talking about, what direction they want to go in musically and everything. And just, kind of catering to their needs, and I think that's important to do.
Right on. Right on. Well, along that same line, you've got roots up here in the Northwest, and you had a school that you started up here teaching your finger tapping method, and as well as just music in general, right? So
that was I started it in 2006, and it went right up into 2016. So I had that school in business for 10 years straight, and then I was teaching at another facility for another school before that for 10 years, but that was closing down. So I opened up my own school, and I brought all the teachers from that one school. Oh, right. And in 1 week, I found a location. I got everything that I needed for it, all the furniture and all the office stuff and all the rooms set up and isolated and everything, and all the right kind of feeding, the right kind of lighting, heating and ventilation, and all the right plugs in the walls and everything, and all the equipment in there. And the next week they came in right when the other place closed down. So not one of the teachers or the students missed one day.
That's awesome.
So the timing was impeccable.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Steve, I'm wondering, so one of the things that I guess when I am looking up Steve, when I know about Steve Lynch, there's what I find is the beginning of Autograph that starts in California, and I know you were from Seattle, and I know you found your way back to the Northwest, but I'm wondering if you might be able to talk to us a little bit about the origins in Seattle. Like, I know you started playing bass to begin with, and what was starting out like for you? Where did what was school like? What, when you were in those formative years when you're like, dude, I want to be a guitar player? And I know a lot. Well, I don't want to speak for you. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. My first inspiration was seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in 1964.
Nice.
And my older sister had her girlfriends over, and they were cute as could be,
Isn't that
and I
the
watched
case?
the way that they react, and they were screaming and jumping around, and I was just a little kid looking at them, and I went, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to make girls do that. But I really got serious when the first time I heard Jimi Hendrix, and that was just a few years later in 1967 when Are You Experienced album came out, and I went, oh my God, this is incredible. But there's already a guitar player that lived on the block, and his name was Jerry Hendrix. So there was Jimi Hendrix and Jerry Hendrix. So he was going to play guitar, and he said, why don't you play bass? And I said, sure. And so I learned bass, and we were put together songs and everything, and we had a great time. But I really always wanted to be a guitar player because I wanted to create those sounds that Jimi Hendrix did. Right. And so Jimi Hendrix died a few years after that in September 18th of 1970. And I was the ripe age of 15 at that time. And I got rid of my bass. I traded it in for a Fender Stratocaster on the day he died. Wow. And so, and that was it. I just went from there. I learned all of his solos by ear because there was just literally no guitar teachers around back in 1970, unless you wanted to learn jazz.
Right.
So I just did that, and I got into Jeff Beck, and I got into Jimmy Page, especially the way that Page wrote. I loved his acoustic stuff, and I just loved the way that he came up with these different riffs and everything. And then I got into Pink Floyd really heavy. That Dark Side of the Moon came out, and I just went, oh my God, this is it. And to this day, it's still my favorite album. But I just kept going and going, and I was playing, in a band. I only played for like 3 years, practiced for 3 years, and then I got into my first professional band. I jammed with neighbors and everything like that. We had our little kind of bands, you know what I mean? But they were more like jamming bands. And then I got into my first professional band at the age of 18, and I started playing professionally all around the Pacific Northwest. The Western, British Columbia,
right.
And the area. So I was always up in Canada and Idaho and Montana, and down into Utah and throughout Oregon and Northern California. So that whole Pacific Northwest area up there was, my stomping ground as far as playing live. And then I called up to my guitar teacher. I had a guitar teacher at that time that was teaching in West Seattle. His name is Don Mock. He's like a jazz fusion guy. And he's still around to this day. He's an amazing player. And I called up to set up lessons because I was coming back into town from Montana. Our string of gigs were up, so I was coming back into town for a couple of weeks. Okay. And they said, well, he's not here anymore. He went down to, they opened up a new school, a guitar school down in Los Angeles. And I said, what? A guitar school? What are you talking about? Yeah. And they said, yeah, I think it's called the Guitar Institute of Technology. Well, I hung up the phone with them, and I called up information down in Hollywood, and I got the number.
Nice.
It was 213-462-1385. I still memorize it. And so I called that number.
That's a hell of a memory right there.
And I got a hold of the lady down there, and I said, is Don Mock in? I need to speak to him. This is a student of his up in Seattle. And so she got him on the phone, actually, and he said, Steve, because I was like one of his favorite students because I always learned everything that came up, Yeah. And so she basically, after she got him on the phone, and he told me that, he said, sell your gear and get down here. And 3 months later, I was there. And this was like the beginning of 1978. And so I just devoted my whole life. I didn't do anything but go to that Guitar Institute and practice. Back then it was called GIT, the Guitar Institute of Technology, before it changed over to Musicians Institute. Right. And so that was it. I started to make connections after that, and there was quite a few bands, actually. There was 4 bands that I was playing with when Autograph actually started to form. But we were just guys that got together on the weekends and jammed, because we were all playing in, we all had other record deals.
Right.
Like, me and the keyboard player were playing with Holly Penfield on Dreamland Records. The drummer was playing in a group called The Coup on A&M Records. The singer was playing in a group called Silver Condor on Columbia Records. And Randy Rand, the bass player, was playing with Lita Ford.
Oh, wow.
So we kind of all had paid gigs.
Yeah.
But when we got together, we had all played in different bands, different incarnations together before, and we really liked playing together. So we just got together on weekends and we jammed. It was like just a beer thing. We play AC/DC songs and stuff like that, just to have fun. Yeah. But then we started writing songs together, and they were really cool. We really liked the way we gelled together, because we had all written and played together before. And so we made a demo with Andy Johns. Andy Johns, the producer, Glenn Johns and Andy Johns. They worked with everybody from Led Zeppelin to the Stones to John Lennon and everything. I mean, just like the sky's the limit. They worked with all these different huge superstars. And then what happened was, after that demo, and the demo came out really good. And it was actually, we had a song on there called "Turn Up the Tape Machine."
I heard that, but the idea of singing "Turn Up the Tape Machine." I mean, you guys were so intuitive. Even then, it was like, we can't have the spirit of the song be dated by the technology. What if we're not using tape machines anymore?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we started thinking about, and so let's just call it "Turn Up the Radio." Yeah. And so we changed it to that after we did the demo. But in the meantime, David Lee Roth was jogging partners with our drummer,
right,
Kenny. They'd known each other for a long time, so they were jogging partners. They'd meet at 8:30 in the morning, go jogging up and down Sunset Boulevard. And, David asked him what he was doing musically. And so Kenny played him this new demo, and he said, David Lee Roth, wow, who are these people? And he says, well, it's Steve Lynch on guitar. And David knew who I was, because I kind of had a name already built for myself in LA at the time. Okay. And he said, who else is playing on it? And Kenny said, well, it's Randy Rand on bass and Steve Plunkett on lead vocals and rhythm guitar. And David went, what? Because you see, Van Halen used to open up for Wolfgang,
right,
which was Randy Rand and Steve Plunkett. So David said this would be perfect, because we opened up all these gigs for them. The whole time down at the Starwood and the Whiskey and Gazzarri's and all that is Van Halen that was always opening up for them, for Wolfgang. And so David wanted to spin it around and have them and us, open up for them for a change. Yeah. And so he invited us on the 1984 tour. So I played my first gig with them on my birthday, January 18th in Jacksonville, Florida, to a sold-out crowd. It was just amazing. And then from that point on, all these record companies were vying for us to sign with them. Right. And RCA, finally, backstage at Madison Square Gardens, we're playing 2 nights up there, sold out. And RCA offered us to keep 100% of our publishing, which is unheard of in the business. Yeah. They always take 50%. Yeah.
RCA did that?
We went, RCA. Wow. Exactly. Elvis and everything. I mean, the Pointer Sisters and all that. I mean, the big RCA, the huge label. And so we went, sold. We're in. So we basically signed a deal backstage.
This is so
at Madison Square Garden.
Like, so Steve, this show right now today is kind of kicking off year 2 of Endorian Guitar Works Backstage. And
we just had our anniversary a couple weeks ago.
First show,
very cool.
The first show that we did. You remember what we talked about? Because we had just gone to the Slash and Miles Kennedy concert. Mm-hmm. And like the big takeaway from that band after 4 albums is just like they've all brought some different kind of the rock world into this band and done it.
Yeah.
And it was like this, I mean, we all know that happens, but like it's here it is happening. And then all the details that you're telling us about, like, you were all in your own gigging bands and it all ended up in the studio, and then someone's like, yeah, you guys need to come tour with us. It's like, It's
Right.
It's
the
happening
same
all
kind of
the
thing,
time.
yeah.
You know, you all looked at each other like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we weren't even a band at that point.
Right.
I mean, we had just gone in and made a demo. We all had these paid gigs. So on our way, driving in a dilapidated old Winnebago from Los Angeles all the way straight across Interstate 10 on into Jacksonville, Florida, we had to come up with a name. So we came up with the name Autograph, you know, just to use temporarily. But then it stuck because we played in front of all these different people. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people during the time touring with them. So we thought, you know, we got to stick with this name.
Yeah.
We've already given it so much exposure. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I heard, and I do want to explore more things than, like, I know you do so many interviews, and I know you're grateful for everything that's happened to you, but I also know that we want to talk about more than, I mean, Turn Up the Radio is amazing, but you've done so many other things too, and we want to get there. But there's one thing I want to ask you before we move that direction. Is it true that I heard a rumor from somebody who will remain unknown or unnamed that a guy came up to you from Van Halen's crew and said, you can't finger tap?
Yes, that was their tour manager. He came up and he asked me, he said, are you Steve Lynch? And this was right before we went on stage for the first gig. And I said, yes. And he said, are you the one that wrote the book on that two-handed technique thing? And I said, yeah. You know, I wrote that back in 78 when I was going to the Guitar Institute. And it's about the two-handed tapping thing. And he says, well, you can't do that on this tour or we're gonna break your hands. You know, they actually threatened me.
Totally,
you know,
like mafia style, right?
Oh, it was totally mafia style. I mean, I thought they were kidding, but he had these two big goons, you know, one on each side of him, and so and they were not smiling. They were dead serious. So I couldn't do it, and I was so pissed off for just getting. I looked at it like, this is something that I've been working on since actually like the early to mid '70s. I'd always done it.
Yeah.
But I really took it seriously when I saw at the beginning of when I started going to the Guitar Institute. Emmett Chapman, the inventor of the stick, he did a clinic there, and I just went, oh my God, all the different things that you can do with this technique. It's absolutely magical what he's doing. So I decided to adapt that kind of idea and use, you know, I was using two fingers before, but then I got into all four, and I started writing down all the scales, all the arpeggios, all the triads, all the chord inversions, everything, so that you can play them two-handed. Yeah. And so by the time the end of the school year happened, I had a stack of paper like that that I've written all these different things out in, you know, every chord transformation that you could think of and everything. And so I had a book written at that time. And when I did, I performed at the end of the graduation ceremony. And Tommy Tedesco, who was like the #1 studio guy in the world, you know, because he played on all those TV shows, every movie you could think about in the 50s and the 60s. He was playing guitar on all that stuff. And Mission Impossible, he wrote that thing, and all that. And so, anyway, him and Howard Roberts, who had written the curriculum for the school, Howard is a famous jazz player who wrote his own, you know, technique of his way of teaching, you know. And so they came up to me after I performed and they said, man, that was just amazing. And they said, would you be interested in writing a book? And I said, I probably have enough right now to write 5 books. And they said, well, great, put together, you know, your basic stuff for it. And we want you to come in tomorrow. We want to introduce you to our publisher. So I went in, brought my material in, brought my guitar and everything. I played for just a couple minutes with the publisher, explained to him how to read, because I had my own way of writing it out. Looking on the guitar neck with different graphs, like a circle to use with your right hand, any of the fingers on your right hand, and then a square to pull off to your left hand, and then a triangle to hammer on with your left hand again.
Okay.
And so circle, square,
it's
triangle.
Coming back because you were teaching that technique at A Sharp, right? Because I remember I would look at it. Looked like a grid. It looked like if you were a newbie and you just looked at it, it looked like a standard chord chart. But then you realize, well, you don't have 17 fingers. And each one of them, if I remember correctly, the number represented the order in which the note was played, but then the circle.
That's correct.
But then the see, I learned.
Yeah, there you go.
But but the shape determined which hand was playing the note.
That's right.
Whether it was an on or off. I want to real quick jump in.
Got it.
We've got Iron Billy on the live chat. Thank you for joining us. First time YouTube live. So wonderful, awesome. Thanks, Billy.
Billy is out in. I've talked with him a number of times. He's out in South Dakota and chimed in just to see Steve Lynch.
Oh, okay.
So saying hi for him.
He did say thanks for getting my ass doing something new. This is awesome so far.
Oh, very cool. So. Right on. That's very cool. You're very welcome, Billy.
So
to finish off the Van Halen story real quick, though.
Yeah.
Just to top that off, it was a little bit later in the tour when I grabbed Eddie and pulled him into a room, and I was a little bit lit on Jack Daniels. So was he. And so we had this little chat, like, why are you stopping me from doing my own technique?
Yeah.
And he knew who I was. You know, he had heard about me plenty of times because they'd go, you ever see that guy that does it with all four fingers? Yeah. It would actually piss him off. But he said, it didn't come from me. He said, that must have been, you know, one of the managers. I said, yeah, I was your tour manager. And so he says, don't worry, I'll call off the dogs. And I said, great, thank you. And from that point on, I was able to play the technique. So
that's awesome.
So anyway,
so they were worried for on Eddie's behalf or whatever. They were talking for Eddie, but Eddie didn't ask.
Yeah.
Right. I don't, to this day, I don't know for sure if Eddie was behind it or not, but he denied it.
Right.
And from that point on, we got along great. I mean, you know, so it was cool, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and that's a technique that like you talk about jazz players, you know, like, I mean, that's a technique that has been around for, I don't remember how long, but it's, rock guys took it and went a different direction with it, but it's like, man, I remember seeing Stanley Jordan play at Jazz Alley and watching him do his thing, and it's like, I remember I saw Stanley Jordan at Jazz Alley in 2005, and I immediately went home and took my ESP LTD and jacked up the action and was like, I'm gonna figure out how to do this, and like 12 hours later, like, nope, not for me.
Yeah, right. It's much more difficult than people realize. It's not like you're just doing triplets going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's a totally different thing when you start using all these different patterns and you're playing one shape of the scale with your left hand and a whole different shape with your right hand, using different fingering. That's a real tough one to wrap your brain around. And then also doing different chord formations, you know, and hitting multiple notes at the same time. And then, you know, arpeggios and everything, playing, you know, like a G major in one hand, and then on the other hand, on your right hand, playing a C major arpeggio against one another. Mm-hmm. So you have two arpeggios happening at the same time, even minor arpeggios with major arpeggios. Same thing with triads, because it works the same way.
Right.
And so I just experimented with it all, you know, and all the little techniques you can get into as far as, you know, like little squiggly things that you do, and then I started incorporating my vibrato arm with my elbow while I was tapping strings and everything, and bending the vibrato arm down, and then hitting two notes, and then bringing it back up, so it sounded like a slide, and then pulling off to my left hand. All these different kind of techniques where people had a really hard time figuring out what the hell I was doing unless they saw me doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it sounded so off the wall.
I can imagine.
So yeah, no, I remember thinking that because I had taken piano lessons as a kid, that like, oh, I'll just like reframe my mindset and I'll think of the guitar as a piano. But even when you do that, you have to remember, like, well, if you think about it and you open your hands up like this, that means that both notes go up when you move your hands apart, and it's still like backwards. Like, it is an entirely unique skill set on its own. But I wanted to address what you mentioned about your vibrato. Okay, so I watched you play I think it was like an orange amps clinic, or you demonstrated how you were doing. And there is a guy right now who's working on a technique. Lewis, I don't remember, but he calls it reverse tapping. And I had seen you do it. Like, you're the only other person that I've really seen do it intentionally, at least that I've looked for. But I think you were playing the Dorian scale, and you were like grabbing a note and sliding up, and then grabbing the next note down. Right. So you were going down the scale.
Yes, exactly. Going down, like say like for E minor pentatonic scale. Yeah. You know, starting up on the 15th fret, sliding that up to the top of the neck, pulling off to your left hand on the 12th fret, sliding that up. Yeah. Then going to the second string, 15th fret, you know, 12th fret, and then 14th fret on the G string, sliding that up, and then 14th fret on the D string, 14th fret on the A string, pulling off to the 12th each time, and then 15th fret on the low E string and sliding, or pulling off to the 12th fret and then sliding that up. You see, so it's like you got the do 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 do, but to figure that out without watching somebody do it,
right.
it's very difficult, because it doesn't sound like anything else.
Well,
and that's mainly what I was going for, was trying to find things that just didn't sound like anybody, because that's what I appreciated most. Was I liked innovative guitar players, that really just sounded really different. That's one of the things I think that really made me fall in love with Jeff Beck's playing, because he was always doing something different, always creating something new. I'm going, God, how's he doing that?
Yeah.
That sounds so cool. So, yeah, there you go.
We just got this at the guitar show. One of the guys that we shared booth with has a few of those for picks.
A pick holder that challenges you in your use of picks.
That's correct.
So yeah, no, I was also noting, like, when I watch the work you do with your tremolo, it's very intentional. Like that's the thing that thinks, like, if you go back and watch this clinic that Steve did, like when I think of when I think of people like getting heavy on a Floyd Rose, and it's to create this massive, and I'll do that again just for everybody. But I watch you sit down, and like, you are so incredibly intentional with what you're dive bombing and looking for silence, and then hitting a harmonic and pulling it out with no noise so that it evolves into a note when you pull it up. It's like, it absolutely is stuff that, it seems to me like that's your Jimmy influence coming through. Like that's the way that's the way he worked the guitar, but you don't see that really anymore. It's this aggressive, like a Floyd Rose is synonymous with super aggressive music, and that's awesome. But you have used it in such a way that it's actually very delicate and nuanced as well, which is wild to me,
What I tried to do basically was not to use any of my technique as, and the way that I played, like you said, with the vibrato arm and everything. Now, I didn't intentionally do those things to kind of be flashy for the audience or anything like that, because, that wasn't my intentions at all. Right. What I wanted to do was actually incorporate everything into melodic solos. Yeah. So whether it be the bending technique, where I'm actually bending down to a note, hitting another note, and then coming up to the note slowly, and then, like in the hammer-on stuff too, the tapping technique, as they call it now. I always tried to do it so that I'm like playing with triads over each chord that's going by, so it's actually complementing the song. Like even in Turn Up the Radio, each different one where I'm going da-la, 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 da-la on the D string, and then I jump down to the G string. Well, when I go to the G string, the chord change. Right. You see what I mean? Yeah. So then I'm playing a triad out of that chord, and so that's just, I just followed each different chord, and I was playing out of the A mixolydian mode, and so that's what I did, was I just followed each different chord, and I found myself doing a lot of that throughout the other albums, and even on that first album, and I kept doing that. I always thought I should follow the chords because that's really melodic, and the way that I would do it, create my solos, is that I would take like a boombox into rehearsal, and then I'd tell the band, okay, play right before, sing the part right before we go into the solo part, and then you guys just play through the solo part while I record, and then come back in with the vocals at the end of that, whether it be the bridge or usually the end chorus, right? Yeah. So this way, when I made up the solo, I'd know exactly what the singer's last note was in the previous chorus or bridge. And then I would match that with my solo, or find something that really complemented it, tell a little story in between, and then come back to where he came in with the vocals again, so it complemented the whole thing. Now, I look at it like this. You write a solo that's particularly just for that song, and I always doubled my solos, always, every solo that you hear me play in the studio, they're all doubled. And so that was my way of kind of like giving it a little bit of kind of off, being out of tune slightly, because tension. I recorded one at 99% with the Studer, the 2-inch Studer 24 track, which I'd be recording on. That would be running at 99% speed, so that when they sped it back up to the regular speed, it was actually playing at 101. You see what I mean? Because it was playing. So then on the second track, we had recorded at 101 speed, to 1% above. And then when it slowed down, it was 1% below natural pitch.
Right.
So when you combine the two together, it's slightly out. Plus, when you do the bending, the bends are never exactly the same. So there's a little bit of dissonance happening each time. And I love that dissonance.
Yeah.
You see, because it brings the listener a little bit outside. They don't know what it is, but it's there. It's prevalent.
Yeah, that's why I love the Phrygian mode. There's that the dissonance between the one and the two always gets me.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Billy asks, do you have any finger or hand health maintenance tips and techniques, or a quick rig rundown? Hard to type and listen. We got you, Billy.
Okay. Okay, asking first about the finger
hand health maintenance and techniques. And actually, I'm really glad he asked that question, because I'm starting to feel that too, where it's like I've got some injuries in the tendons, and like how do I not, and now that I'm realizing my own problem, but like not only am I playing, but I'm building, and I'm really realizing how valuable all 10 of these are. And if you damage one, you got issues. Like
absolutely.
Advice.
I would say the most important thing is to practice with as little amount of pressure that you possibly can. That's going to really preserve your hands. Okay, so to practice with a light touch on each hand, and then when you really want to dig in and show emotion, really dig in with both ends. Your pick hand and with your with your left hand, of course, but try to play with a light touch. That's the thing, and that's the thing I always struggled with. Is I kept on, especially live, I kept on saying, Steve, lighten up. Your hands are good. Your hands are killing you right now,
right.
But I would get so aggressive and I get so amped up when on stage, that I'd play way too heavy. But yeah, that's one of the things. And then always practice, like learn a little bit from your favorite guitar players, but then try to transform that into your own thing. And one of the things that I kind of got away from, as far as when I was going to the Guitar Institute, was I started to learn like John Coltrane solos, saxophone solos. And that brought me into a whole different venue of listening and my phrasing and everything. Listen to saxophone solos, and then also like Jean-Luc Ponty, who played, Alan Holdsworth played with. I was trying to figure out Alan Holdsworth, who's just like impossible to figure out, it's just like, because he combines different scales, and he's got all this hand stretch that is just like an octopus fingers, and so I was trying to figure him out. But then when I was listening to Jean-Luc Ponty with Alan Holdsworth on it, I went, oh God, it's such a cool violin solo. And so I'd figure out the violin solo, and so that gave me a different perspective again, because there's different techniques that come out.
Different
and
phrasing.
Then when I was listening to, like, say, for instance, Pink Floyd, I'd try to learn some of the, the song Money, where there's that sax solo. I tried to emulate exactly what the sax was doing as far as raking while he's slurring notes, you know what I mean? Yep. So I'd rake those notes instead. And so that gave me another idea as far as, how to bring another sound out of the guitar by emulating another instrument.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And so I think that's a very important thing to do. As far as writing goes, I would say, don't listen to anybody. Write from your heart. Write from what's inside you. Yeah. Never follow anybody else's, footprints. That's already been created. The important thing is that you create something on your own. Now, one of the, the examples of that, of course, are when you look back at Led Zeppelin. They didn't write anything commercially viable for radio at the time. Right. Same thing with Pink Floyd. They ran songs together. The songs were too long. They made it so that you couldn't do a single because it would blend into another song. They didn't care because they were writing exactly what they were feeling.
Right.
And they really thought that they weren't going to be commercially successful in the beginning because they did that. But because of that, and the fact that they were playing exactly what they wanted to play and what they felt inside, they became huge successes.
Well, I got to say,
there it is.
That's some of my favorite music myself, is that stuff. Yeah. The stuff that's not, quote, commercially viable, right? Today,
no, it's not.
Especially with everything is that 2.5 minute soundbite, because everybody's got that super short attention span. Yeah. You get bands coming with concept albums that are an hour long song, essentially, that it's hard for people to keep. Yeah, exactly. It's hard to keep attention spans. One of the bands that I really like that did that, actually, they're called Sleep. They're from California. Matt Pike is now in High on Fire and stoner rock bands, right? But Sleep did a record. The entire record is literally one song. You flip the record over, it's still the same song. It's just a continuation.
That's great.
It's killer. It's something you just put on and just sit, right? Yeah. You just spend 45 minutes just relaxing and just enjoying it. And maybe you're smoking or drinking or whatever, but
yeah, exactly. Whatever.
Exactly. So that's what I'm into, but
yeah. No, very cool. Go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
Well, I was gonna mention too, Billy was asking about rig rundown. Like what do you use? What do you currently use? I know you were talking about you had a Fender when you switched over from bass, right? What do you currently
well,
play?
Then I played several guitars. I had Strats and I had Les Pauls and everything. And then I started to play my Strat more because of the vibrato arm.
Okay.
And that's when I really started getting into that. And then I went back to Les Paul for a while, but I really missed the vibrato arm. And so during the time I was going to school, the Guitar Institute back in '78, that's when I started to get back into the vibrato arm. And I just wanted to experiment with it, differently, than anything else I was hearing. And so I really experimented with it. As far as my equipment goes, though, that I play through, I play through numerous things. It's usually always been some form of a Marshall or another, usually old ones, but the thing is that I switched off. I also played through Carbon Heads for a while. They had a run where they were making really good amps. And then I started using different pedal boards. I tried out so many. Oh my God. And I had rack mount equipment too. I mean, everything you could imagine during the 80s, I had in my rack at one time.
I think everybody did back then,
didn't they? The ADA stuff and the Rocktron and all that, and Rockman and stuff, and I was trying out all that stuff. So
back when all that stuff was actually played through on stage before it was all direct in and all background,
yes,
all the modelers.
Yeah. So now I'm looking at it more like I want to curtail my playing into more imaginative things now. I've already done, a certain amount of things with my playing, and I've always really, kind of expanded the boundaries with that. But what I really like is when I hear guitar players play with just a totally different sound, and I go, oh God, how did they do that? And so what I'm doing now is I'm upgrading my equipment now, but I'm going to go back to guitar rig, because the guitar rig actually for recording, that was like the best sounds I ever got for recording. And so I'm going to probably go back to that, of course, the amplitude and everything, and experiment with sounds that not necessarily just typical guitar sounds at all. Because one thing that happens is when you play with different sounds, it makes you play differently.
Right.
If you use the same sound all the time, you're going to pretty much be playing the same stuff and using the same technique. But when you change it up, all of a sudden you go, oh, hey, wait. And then you write something that's completely not like you. And I love that because it inspires you to go off on this new adventure.
Yeah. It's funny how quickly that can happen too. I remember there are a couple moments that I can think of specifically where I ended up writing something that I never would have written just because I picked up one of my guitars that I forgot was in an alternate tuning. Yeah. But started playing something that I thought was in a different tuning. And what comes out of it is that wasn't my intention, but now I'm going to intentionally chase that and write something with that. And which kind of is like, challenging yourself to go back and play something, a Charlie Parker tune or something that's coming out of a violin, an instrument that's tuned in fourths has different qualities than an instrument that's tuned in fifths. And you get to kind of play in their sandbox for a little bit and then just experience different things that your mind does and channels it into an instrument.
And that's a great example of using different tunings to write in,
Sure.
and just like all of a sudden you're coming up with something that doesn't sound like anything you've heard before.
Right.
And because we've got to be honest here. Look, 99% of everything that's written is in standard tuning, and so when you take it outside of that, whoa, you're creating something that's not, that most people are not used to hearing. So it kind of creates a new you.
I've been hearing a lot about the DADGAD tuning. That's kind of become...
the DADGAD tuning, the open G tuning, all that. Yeah.
For me, it's like when I write something on my acoustic, and it's totally just sounds completely different than the metal stuff or the stonery stuff that I wrote on my electric, and then I play it on the electric and add a little distortion and add a little bit of the balls to it, and it's like, whoa, this sounds fucking good. Like, this is totally different, but awesome.
Absolutely.
I love doing that.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I did with the writing when I did my solo album, Network 23. I recorded that, in Columbus, Ohio, a couple studios in LA, and then finished it off at New River Studios out of Fort Lauderdale. And but what I did in the writing process was I wasn't listening to music at all. And a lot of it I wrote, and this is something that I think is a really good approach, is to write it from the drums up rather than having the guitar in your hands. Create a beat and then write something from that beat, because then you have a good solid beat going, and you go, oh,
that's interesting.
I love that idea, because
in my head.
It gets you out of the Western music idea too.
Right, because guitar players always write from the guitar. They come up with the guitar riff and they think that's really cool and everything. But actually, it's mundane because it sounds like everything else that you write. Okay, so try a different approach. I mean, write it from the drums up, from the beat up, and then create around that.
We should have Simon write our next Gunslinger tune.
I might have to sit behind him and try to teach him a little bit of raga, because I love that stuff back in college. That shit was fun. Very cool. Very cool indeed.
I want to, I told you a little bit before we started the show that, I absolutely want this to be an interview with Steve, not an interview with the lead guitar player from Autograph. I want all dimensions of you. Mm-hmm. So tell us.
Well, you're kind of getting a lot of it right now.
I love it. I want to continue this.
We appreciate it.
Tell us more about Neptune, or Network 23 and Blue Neptune. Correct? There was another one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Network 23. It was just basically a concept idea. Like I went into it without thinking about the commerciality of it, because I'd already done that throughout the whole 80s, and really think about what was, acceptable for radio, and trying to please the record company, of course. But during the last part, towards the end of Autograph, we were doing demos after the RCA deal. We were doing demos for Epic Records. And I kind of went off on a different writing tangent where I thought, okay, this one's not quite right for Autograph. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of put it away, and because it just had nothing to do with the sound of Autograph, and so I wrote songs for Autograph, for the Epic deal that we were going to sign. Mm-hmm. And then I had my own songs that I put aside from that. And so I found myself in the studio, and I thought, you know what, I think since I did a demo of most of these songs and I played the instruments on it, I think I'm going to do that in the studio. Yeah. So rather than hiring a bunch of guys, I decided to just do everything in the studio, because, I'm not a great keyboard player, but I can figure out what to do, and so I did all the keyboards. I played a lot of the percussive stuff on there, and I did all the bass parts, all the rhythm and lead parts, and I really liked the way it came out. And then I had great ideas, for different types of lyrics. And so when I brought in a singer down in Florida, I brought in a different singer from what I originally had. And this guy named Scott Gilman, and he came in and he just took those songs that I had. And so we kind of just wrote some more lyrics to it. And then I just kind of let him run, because such a great lyricist. And so he just went off on this tangent, and I just went, wow, this is really good. And then he'd change some of the melody lines around a little bit more to adjust his voice, and then I'd give him, pointers on how I kind of wanted him to use in some parts more of a baritone voice than the typical tenor voice that you hear. And so he took that and ran with that too. And then I had Chris Frazier, who worked with Steve Vai and just recently was with Foreigner for, God, I don't know, maybe over 20 years, and so, but he's played with Whitesnake too, and everybody. And then I had come in and do a couple other tracks. I had Mike Mangini, who's been with Dream Theater now for 20 some odd years too. I had him come on a couple of songs and play drums. And so I had a couple of kick-ass drummers come in, and lay down tracks. And so, but that there again, I had written a lot of these from the drums up. Yeah. So when they came in, I knew exactly what I wanted them to play,
Very cool.
So it worked out really well.
Very cool.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, if you didn't bring it up, I was going to ask you specifically who you had on vocals, because I didn't remember getting a name when we were listening to it, and they're great. The vocals on that are fantastic, and
they just are. Scott did all the vocals. I did some of the backgrounds, but he did most all of it. And it's just amazing. And we did that in a week. Wow. I mean, the writing and all of the vocal tracks and everything, we did that in 1 week.
Wow.
So,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
We were listening, one of the tracks we were listening to, we actually kind of felt like we heard some Cure vibes in there.
Yeah, it was a little bit kind of almost gothy.
Exactly, because I told him, I said, like that Jim Morrison kind of Billy Idol type, more baritone-ish kind of thing, or Brian Ferry, I said, listen, incorporate some of that. And he went, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's not really in my range. That's not what I usually sing. And I said, yeah, so let's try it, And so he did. And it just came out great.
Yeah.
So it gives a whole different vibe, because when you have the songs and the singer's always singing right in that same range, and they don't try to lower their voice or the real high range, that doesn't do anything for me anyway. I'm more of a guy that let's keep to the meat and bones of this, just writing good songs, and let's not try to show off with vocals, but let's really kick ass when you want to, you know what I mean? Yeah. But let's not base it around what range you have with your vocals. We don't really need that.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing right now with Gunslinger, is kind of like that. I'm more of a baritone. And I'm a baritone. I mean, I used to have more range than I do now, but and our other guitar player has more of that higher tenor range. So we do a lot of double vocals and harmonies.
There you go.
He'll take one song and I'll take the next song and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
He and I write all of the stuff together. And so we've written most of the parts. We bring it to the band, and the band adds what they need to make it a full song. But that certainly is a part of it. It's like we're doing this kind of traditional metal, like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest kind of style thing, but not going that high range, high pitched vocal like everybody expects.
Right.
And it's really cool.
Yeah.
And Billy was saying too that every time that he rehearses, there's a new riff because of the drum beat with his band. So
yes, there you go.
Same kind of thing. Yeah. So
yeah,
it's really
absolutely
cool.
It really works when you approach it from a different standpoint.
Yeah.
Rather than just, and it's the same way that I made up my solos. I made up every one of my solos without a guitar in my hands.
Oh wow. Okay.
I heard it. I would listen to it over and over and over again. The part where I was supposed to solo over. And I refused to have a guitar in my hands. I said, I'm just going to play the same stuff if I have a guitar in my hands. So I'd hear it in my head, and then I'd hear just like a few bars, and then oh, what's that? That's really cool. Then I'd grab my guitar and I'd figure out what that is. And then I'd lay that down, and then I'd listen to, okay, what comes after that? I go, oh, I'm starting to hear something now. Let me figure out what that is. And I do it section by section. And I've always done it that way, just section by section, writing out the solos. It's like, lyrics in a melody line. You always want something different for each song. And I thought it's the same way with solos, because it's a different solo in a different song. So you got to play something different. And so that's the way I approach it. And that's the way I still do approach it. It's just like, look at it like a whole new adventure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Lyle told me something I didn't realize how profound it was, like back in the day, but he told me I'm going to screw this up, but I think he knew somebody who was in the military, who was deployed for a very long time, could not hold a guitar, or it might have been incarcerated, but he did not have access to an instrument. And at the time he did, he had to like build the finger strength back, but he'd actually gotten better because of the mental practicing. He'd been like visualizing everything. And I was like, is that really a thing that you can do? And then I was, all this playing I was doing during the pandemic, like really like putting the pedal to the metal in terms of my own personal growth. I would realize that at a certain point, once you've learned something, muscle memory kicks in, and that's where it's all about metronome and speed. But when you're learning something, you will never play it unless you can visualize it. And like, I would get to this, at least for me, and I would get to this place where it's like, the practicing I need to do right now, I can actually do laying in bed. I close my eyes and I imagine the runs, but holding the instrument right now isn't doing me any good. I have to have it here. And I would actually just sit there and think it through. And I'd come down and pick up the guitar the next morning. And it's like that work that I was doing in my head without even holding the guitar. And it's just like, I just proved something that I'm kind of scared of, to be, totally honest.
Right. Because you're so dependent on the guitar, right? But when you let yourself go and you let your imagination do the work, man, you find out you come up with all kinds of stuff that you never previously thought that you could. So, but anyway, that's kind of what I'm doing with the writing with Blue Neptune. We kind of touched on that for a second. Right. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at that as just whatever I hear that's really different in my head. That is, then I figure out what I'm hearing, or else I'll put the drum beat down so I remember what the drum beat is. Because again, I always write from not always, but a good percentage of the time I write from the drum beat on up. And I'm playing more with my guitar synth, the GR55, and that's because again, it doesn't allow me to just play like what I usually play. You have that tendency to always just play what you're used to, but when you play with these different sounds, like we were talking about before, especially on a guitar synth, you have to play completely different, from what you usually do, and to make sense of it. And so I love that. I love the challenge of that, actually. Right. And so I'm writing it that way. I'm keeping more cutting edge technology as far as beats and the sounds and everything, because I want to create something like a new version of the Dark Side of the Moon. You know what I mean? Right. Something where it's just a concept. I could care less about it being commercially successful. That's not what it's about. I could care less about those kind of things in my life at this point. I'm more interested in just musically creating whatever I want and having the freedom to do so.
Heck yeah. So
you're going to be out, are you going to be performing these, whether to backing tracks or with a band?
That may happen. Right now I'm doing like a final, editing on my book. It's called Turn It Up, Confessions of a Rock Guitarist. And it's about my whole life, like how I got started in this and all the bizarre stories. I mean, I would tell people these stories, and people would say, God, you gotta write a book. You have so many of these incredible, weird stories too, and just all your adventures around the world and all this. And so I thought about it, and so I started writing down sentences, that would remind me of that story. And so before you know it, I had like 200 sentences written down for 200 different stories. And so then when the pandemic hit, I thought this was the time to write it. So
Steve,
right then,
awesome. He's so good at interviews. Like, he's got all of our segues for us. Like, I was just about to ask you about the book, and you got it. You nailed it. But
that's the organic conversation.
That's the organic conversation, but it's really vibing, and I'm digging it. But I've realized that so many of the conversations we have, they've got this pandemic component, because I feel like so many people started to do new stuff.
There's an impact there,
rediscover their self or whatever it is, and I'm wondering. So you were writing. Now I know you were writing these 200 sentences, and then the pandemic hit. So this wasn't an idea that you were sitting there with nothing to do, and you're like, I'm going to write a book. Like, it was already the groundwork had been laid.
It was already
and now you had
kind of a work in progress already, but I just didn't actually sit down on the computer and start writing it out until that happened.
Yeah. Right.
Then I just kind of chronologically went through and arranged all these different sentences into chronologically how it happened, and so here it is, my story right from the beginning, on up to present day.
Fantastic.
And when I showed it to an agent, publishing agent,
mm-hmm.
just like that. But then I realized, well, with the publishing agent, you got to pay them, and I've already done all the work, and so I said to the agent, I said to her, I said, I think I want to self-publish this or go with a hybrid publisher. And I decided to go with a hybrid publisher because instead of 10%, you actually make 25%.
Oh, there you go.
But the difference is that you have to do a lot of the work yourself as far as the editing and all that kind of stuff, as far as the pictures inside, as far as the cover design, all of the stuff. That's up to you to do.
Right.
So I've learned how to do all these things, since the pandemic hit, basically.
Gives you a lot of creative control, for sure.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is, once you hand a book into a regular publisher like Simon Schuster or something like that,
mm-hmm.
they will butcher it. They'll change the title of it.
Right.
They'll change the whole look of the book because they're looking at bookshelf sales. That's not me.
Right.
I want it to be a true story of me and what I want the aesthetic to be like. And so they also edit out so many parts of it. Like I gave it to this one editor just to have her look through it, and she butchered it, and I just went, you completely took away my personality from what you did to it.
Yeah.
So I went back to the original before I gave it to her, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to do all the editing and everything myself, all the artwork, everything is going to be myself. And with a hybrid, not only do you make that 25% instead of 10%, but you have full control over you have full artistic control over everything.
I love
which
that.
is great.
That's
They'll
fantastic.
give you little things like I had 44 chapters, and they said 44 chapters, that's a lot of chapters in a book. And she wants me to bring it down to 18. I'm thinking, from 44 down to 18, that's going to be
How many books
She
you want?
literally
Right.
has no idea what it's like to be a touring rock guitarist, right?
Yeah.
right, exactly. Because your life pivots at any given moment, so you can't combine one chapter with the next because they're so different.
Yeah.
What would you title that chapter?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so the way
This,
that
that,
they're
and the other
titled
thing,
right
right?
now, yeah, exactly. So it's like the way it's, titled right now is for that. Each chapter is titled for that chapter.
Yeah.
So I'll combine some of them, but it's kind of a work in progress right now. It'll take me about another month. And then the next step is where I go through with their lead editor and we go through each sentence in the whole book, but I know I don't want to change anything because I've already written it, the whole book, 6 different times, and I've re-edited it 11 times.
Dang.
So it's pretty much, but that's what happens. You see, if I
Right.
would have just handed it in a couple of years ago and said, go for it, it wouldn't be anything like what I wanted it to be. So
Right.
I'm
Somebody
glad
else
that
would have
it's
done all
taken
that.
this extra, yeah, exactly. So I'm glad it's taken this extra time, but it's well worth the price because the end product will be me all the way.
So once it's out and published and everyone's reading it, have you considered doing like a part B where you do like a self-read audio book and you can actually put audio clips in it too?
Oh yeah.
Heck
Yeah, there will definitely be an audio.
That's fantastic.
book.
I'm
Yeah.
so excited. Is there?
But it'll be a female with a British accent.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Hey,
so
that works
Siri,
for me.
Siri's gonna read the book. I like it.
That's awesome.
So I know it's been kind of pushed a little bit, but do you have at this point? Do you have a date or an approximate release date?
For the book?
Yeah, for the book. Yeah.
Okay, I would say from the way it looks right now, when all the artwork's done and everything, I would say 5 months.
5 months.
All right.
Very cool.
5 to 6 months at the most, because that's what I was just talking to the publisher about, and he says, yeah, once we get this done, then we just have to do this step. It might be sooner than that. It could only be 3 months away. You know what I mean? But I want to make sure everything's right. All the artwork and all the pictures are placed in the right places and all that.
Right.
So, if it takes 6 months, that's fine.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
maybe
I don't
around
mind.
July or August we should see if Steve's got an opening and come back. And
That's what I'm looking
visit
for.
us.
Is still a summertime release, but maybe a late summertime release.
Yeah. Come back and visit us when it's out,
Yeah,
and
we're
we
gonna
can
read
talk
the book
about
and then
the
we're gonna talk about
stories.
stories.
That's the thing is, once you read the book, and then you're going to have a ton of questions for me
Oh,
about
yeah.
all these stories, you know. So, yeah, I'd love to come back and chat about it, you know. But that's kind of where my life is now, is making sure that the book, you know, is just the way I like it, and go out and do a book tour, you know, with it to promote it, and then it's into the studio for me, and I'll have my studio built. I'll be able to just put all my concentration on that. But one thing I've learned in my older age now is that don't combine too many things at once, because those other things take a hit. You don't get to put your best self into things when you commit to too many things at once.
Yeah. Like Ron Swanson said, don't half-ass two things when you can whole-ass one.
That's right.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
No, there's a lot of truth there. You know, learning how to say no, learning how to dedicate yourself to one thing, realizing that saying no isn't trying to push back in terms of like, I don't want to be helpful. No. It's like, no, because I want to give 100% to this, and then we'll talk.
It's setting a healthy boundary.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly what I've been doing, you know, ever since I started writing the book. I've learned to say no to a lot of people, you know, want me to get involved in different things, and even to just play on one song, you know. I just say, you know what, the way that I commit to something, it's not just coming in and just winging off one song. It means that I'm going to practice on that song for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and come up with the perfect solo and everything and all the perfect parts, and then I'll lay it down. You know, and then I have to find the right sound and everything, and put my all into it. So it's a commitment where I do nothing but that for a couple of weeks. So what you're asking me to do is not just come in and play on a 3-minute song. You're asking me to give up 2 weeks of my life.
Yeah. Right.
You know?
Appreciate that.
You had a couple questions.
Yeah, we're getting. You know, we've been on for a little over an hour now. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, my phone's letting me know that I don't have too much time left.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know,
we'll wrap it up quick. But in case we do get cut off, I want to specifically thank you for saying yes to this opportunity. Yeah. This has been absolutely amazing and valuable, and I believe that these kind of things are valuable to everyone, whether or not you're a guitar player or you're just, you know, Google Steve Lynch and you come across this on YouTube and you say, wow, and you get to hear some of these really, really, you know, good nuggets of information. You know, I believe.
Well, that's good. I hope that I do help some people in some way or another. You know, even if it's just one thing.
Yeah.
You know, then I've been a teacher for so long that I'm used to sharing information, and you know, I really enjoy it when I see people take that information and do something with it.
I appreciate that, 100%. What I was kind of curious about is, like, what are you listening to now? Like, what whether it's modern music or if it's even, you know, classic rock.
What am I listening to now?
What do you listen to now? What gets your blood going right now?
You know, I really like this band. I've been listening to them for years. Is Porcupine Tree. They're a British band, and they're very progressive, but they're very British. You know, I've always been kind of like you say, like I've been into British bands. Like I say, Led Zeppelin, and even Hendrix at a point was kind of British because he played with two British guys, and he was living in England. But you know, and Pink Floyd, and then Moody Blues, just not Moody Blues, but different British-based bands. And I really got into Genesis and more progressive bands like that with really good musicians in them.
Yeah.
But they also had great songs. It just wasn't about playing, you know, progressive music all the time. It was more about, you know, being really good musicians and working well together, creating great music. So them, and then Stephen Wilson, he's a part of that. And then also I'll listen to bands that don't even use much guitar at all, just because of the beats, like Massive Attack. You know, and so most people are not even familiar with these names. You know, I'll listen to alternative radio, like a lot of the bands that play on Network Records. It's NETTWERK Records, and they sign really unique bands. You know, so what I'm saying is that basically I can mention a bunch of bands' names, but nobody's going to know them because of the fact that they're not here.
Yeah.
And they're not even that popular here. But like when I say Porcupine Tree, they sell out stadiums, you know, in different countries.
Oh yeah.
You know.
I know exactly what you're talking
about. It's just that here they're not commercially viable the way American radio is set up. You know what I mean? What people's tastes are.
Well, my favorite band is Swedish, so nobody knows about them here.
Yeah. You know, I I was listening to Slipknot yesterday, and I just went, God, they have some real singers actually really good. He's got these really good melody lines, and then he just comes out and just belts out this horror, but it all fits together really well. So
as a guy as a boy who was born in Iowa, I always appreciate it when Iowa bands get some love.
yeah, there you go.
Opeth is another one that's got kind of like they go from the vocal to the
and
scream.
Steven Wilson produced one of their albums. The guy I was just talking about, he was the singer in Porcupine Tree, and then he has his own solo career. He produced one of Opeth's albums. So he's really popular in that Scandinavian, which they're from, and the whole European and Eastern European and that whole otherworldly sound. And that's what I like listening to. Opeth's a good example there too.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
They're really
musicians.
heavy, but then they got this acoustic stuff that's like really brilliant.
If you really listen to it, like it's very musical. Even the heavier stuff, can turn a lot of people off because they're just not used to that heaviness. But if you really actually listen to it, God, it's just musical.
Really, really driving.
My favorite band is the Helicopters from Sweden, and they're just straight up rock and roll, like.
Right. And I was one that I really liked Tool and Perfect Circle because I love Maynard. I love what he does with his vocals, and I love the writing behind that because it was so different at the time. And I even like a band like Sigur Rós, and a lot of people don't know who they are. They're an Icelandic band, but they're completely different from anybody. And so that's what I like is when they're so different from anything else, and I just go, wow, what is that? Because it's just not anything that I'm used to hearing, it's completely fresh and new.
I find a lot of stuff is coming out of Georgia in the last decade that's been really progressive, heavy, very heavy, Mastodon, Baroness, bands like that.
The country Georgia or the state?
The state of Georgia.
Okay.
United States. But it's, it's like, you think Georgia, you think probably REM, stuff like that.
Yeah,
You got Mastodon and Baroness and bands like that. They're really heavy and melodic and progressive metal.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very different. And they've been doing this like when you talk about the drum driven song, like you write the song from the drum up, I think of Baroness 100%.
Yeah. There you go.
And it's real fun to find bands like that.
Yeah. There's also from the past, like when you look up around Athens, Georgia, which is north of Atlanta, and it's a college town.
Right.
They call it Talking Heads, B-52s.
Right.
That's their area, and REM.
Yep.
And so you look at that, and they kind of they produced their own sound. It was that other side of the '80s where it's kind of a little bit of a new wave, a little bit more progressive in a different direction. So.
Well, we were talking earlier, speaking of that kind of being from the Seattle area and the Northwest and kind of being on the other side of the, Seattle kind of came to light again with the grunge movement. Like,
absolutely.
How was that for you and your music?
I looked at the whole grunge thing like this, and a lot of people don't like to hear me say this, but the way I look at it is that rock at the end of the commercial rock at the end of the 80s became so homogenized, and there was so much reverb on it, and the lyrics were so sappy, and it was all about guys in limousines getting these great looking women. All the videos were and everything. Well, we even had a few of those ourselves, but it was all catering to the glam and glitz of the whole rock industry, but it wasn't talking to the average teenager or 20-something that was going through some really harsh times.
Right.
It wasn't speaking to them at all.
Right.
Not like when I was that age back in the 60s and the 70s. They had some very radical stuff back then. And so I look at it like there needed to be a change, and it happened. And a lot of people don't like the way it happened, but I thought about it and I thought, God, this kind of just kicked our ass, but the 80s people's ass. But I thought, but you know what? It had to happen.
Yeah.
It had to happen. Music had to go in a different direction, and it did.
Well, and I think
it completely aimed it in a different direction.
I think in some ways it kind of is cyclical, like it's coming back.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
So, because the grunge movement itself became homogenized. Like everybody was trying to sound like that one thing that hit 10 years prior. So it all kind of goes and it comes back around. So I appreciate that outlook on it.
Right. And it wasn't something where I would sit there and listen to on headphones, because I'm more into, progressive type of rock, more fine tuned. But I totally understood where it came from, because the kids needed to hear what was really going on. And they were Nirvana and all these different bands from Seattle were a reflection of what was really going on in the world, rather than the candy coated stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And the rock industry needed that. It needed a kick in the ass. And then it led into a totally different thing into the 90s.
Yeah.
It completely changed everything.
Yeah.
So,
Steve, I want to be respectful of your time and your phone battery, because you might have a call that you have to make after this. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
That's very much
absolutely.
so.
I'll be glad to come back, you guys. Anytime. Let's wait till after the book comes out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Or you listen to it.
Yeah.
You listen to this British girl, speaking the audible version of it. So, but we'll come back and I'll be glad to be back on and talk about all the stories in there. So, because there's plenty of them.
Sounds great. I will. I'll be in touch with you tomorrow or the next day, and just thank you so much. You can go ahead and drop off, and have a great night.
Okay, thank you, and please send a version of this.
Oh, I will, absolutely. I'll send you all that.
Send you the whole thing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
Appreciate
thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Iron Billy thanked you as well.
Yes, Iron Billy also. Big thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Billy.
All right. You take care.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Wow. That was fun.
And how often do we have that opportunity?
Not very. Steve Lynch, an icon, and down to earth dude. Like, I love it.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the things that I most appreciate about the guy. I mean, amazing guitar player, done it all, and he's still there. He's still a dude.
Yeah, he's still making music.
Yeah.
Still rocking, still writing new stuff, doing things on his terms.
On his terms.
And
that's how you have to do it.
I appreciate that more than anything. I mean, it's what we're doing here, right? It's all on our terms.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing with Gunslinger. It's all on our terms. We're writing it. We're producing it.
Gunslinger's going to be fun, by the way. If you're in Olympia on April 29th.
April 29th, $10 at the door. We do have some pre-sale.
Walk
we do
and
have
sling
some pre-sale tickets that we're going to be hopefully getting. So you might want to hit us up if you want a pre-sale ticket.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll try to get you on the list. Get you an actual ticket. There's some cool little tickets too.
Wasn't there some dispute over what the door price was?
No, it was. Okay. That was just the first mock-up of the flyer had the wrong price on it, and that was a misunderstanding, I think.
Yeah, that's fine.
Inflation's a bitch.
So we made it almost all the way to 9 o'clock Pacific time, so I think we're probably going to cut this rather than dive into the guitar show. Maybe we'll talk about that in 2 weeks or something.
Yeah, we can do that.
Or we can do some little vignettes. Actually,
what do we have coming up?
What do we have coming up?
Do you remember off the top of your head, or we got to pull up the calendar?
I got to pull up the calendar because I have been captivated by an incredible interview. I'm going to pull up my board here. Enduring Guitar Works Backstage. Coming up, we have Sabu.
Oh, that's right.
From Rhythms Coffee. He is a local Olympia artist.
He's a very good dude.
Very good dude. We have, that is April 4th. April 18th, we have Reddix from Fort Wayne, Indiana. A couple young dudes making some hard rock. So, yeah.
All right, so we'll have some live music coming up for all y'all.
And then we have a reschedule. Mr. Paul Kobalinski, who is a freelance copywriter, is going to be on May 16th. He's also in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Yeah.
And doing some amazing things.
Nice. He's not in Tennessee anymore. Okay.
Yeah, well, he was. Well, we'll let him tell the story. But
yeah,
he was in Tennessee for a bit, and then he went to Indiana.
No, he was supposed to be on a couple weeks ago. I was not able to make it because I was down.
Oh, yeah.
Was he not able to either, or was that just?
Well, we decided we wanted it. I mean, we could have done it, but we wanted all three of us to be there. So.
I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, actually, we've got some pretty cool videos that are going to come out in the next week. If you saw Mr. Tony Bennington on episode 20 of Endorian Guitar Works Backstage,
who also went to the Musicians Institute.
Also went into the Musicians Institute, and actually, it's funny because some of those stories were sort of they were parallel.
Yes,
like in terms of like
different guys, but
how
still,
Steve got hooked up and how Tony just drove there.
Yeah.
But Tony popped into the guitar show on March 11th, and if you probably heard him demoing that red one, the Bourbon Street. And he's going to be over here, and we're going to make that one. We're going to make some demo videos of all 5 of these guys, so you can have high-res, high audio fidelity demo videos of all 5 of these if you're interested in any of them.
Heck yeah.
Cool.
Sweet. Well, I guess until next time.
Until next time, you're going to let me remember. How do we tag out? Oh,
well,
yeah.
I'm Brian. This is Matt.
I'm Matt.
Fret less. Rock more. See you guys.
What?
Bye.
Why?
Bye.
Bye.